Hello, and welcome to What is Innovation, the podcast that explores the reality of a word that is in danger of losing its meaning altogether. This podcast is produced by Outlast Consulting, LLC, a boutique consultancy that helps companies use innovation principles to solve their toughest business problems. I'm your host, Jared Simmons, and I'm so excited to have Mark Jeffries. Mark Jeffries is the founder and chief executive officer of Foresight, an award-winning senior executive and startup founder with more than 25 years of success delivering profitable sales growth for some of the world's most visible brands. Mark spent over 16 years at Procter Gamble in marketing, leading brands such as Pampers, Always, and Gillette. He spent the past 5 years leading marketing on Amazon as well as step-changing Gillette's global e-commerce business. Leveraging his combination of corporate acumen and entrepreneurial zeal, Mark launched his first startup, Mobile Agent Now, in January 2018, an Uberized review response model, which he sold in July 2020. Foresight was born out of Mobile Agent Now as clients like Procter Gamble, Clorox, Nestle, and Energizer saw value in mining reviews for actionable insights. Mark attained his MBA with honors from Georgetown University's McDonough School of Business and his BA in history also with honors from the University of Chicago. As a seasoned board member, Mark has held positions with Go Vibrant, a nonprofit that he founded and is still chair of the board, the Cincinnati Parks Foundation, the Carnegie Visual and Performing Arts Center, and the University of Chicago Alumni Committee. Mark, thank you so much for joining us and squeezing us into all of that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Love being here.
We had the chance to cross paths way back in our P&G days, and always had a smile on your face, always had interesting insights, and you always knew your stuff, and were willing to explain to folks not in your area of expertise kind of what was going on behind the curtain, which I always appreciated. So thank you for that.
Thank you for the kind words. I loved us working together, and it's always great to reconnect with people after so many years and catch up and talk things like innovation.
Yeah, if you don't say how many, I won't say how many.
Exactly.
We'll just keep that number quiet to ourselves. Exactly. So let's dive in, Mark. Tell me, what is innovation?
Innovation for me is making new connections that didn't exist before. Mm-hmm. So it's obviously in the business environment, it's about building competitive advantage. Also in government, it's about that. Mm-hmm. It's also about how you create something new, right? Whether it's a new product, a new service, a more efficient or effective way of doing something. It truly needs to be disruptive. I think what people call innovation a lot of times is not as much innovation as just incremental change. Mm-hmm. But I think it is that ability to connect the dots in ways that people haven't connected before, right? You think about things like the iPhone. People had phones before. Right. That wasn't innovative. It was the way that they connected the dots that was innovated. Mm-hmm. And so it's those types of examples that I think innovation really is finding those new connections.
New connections. Yeah, I think you're right. And I wonder how throughout your career, as if we just look maybe at your marketing career in the Fortune 500 world, what is a connection? How would you define a connection in that space?
A connection often crosses functions. Mm-hmm. So it might be that you see something so if you're in marketing, marketing, of course, is about understanding your consumer. Right. And then promising them a benefit and a reason to believe of whatever it is that you're promising them. And then, of course, delivering it in a way that is unique and meaningful to them. And the connection could be around your consumer, around finding insights about your consumer that maybe others haven't, mm-hmm. because you're seeing connections in maybe their everyday life, how they interact with brands differently than other brands. Right. So innovation can come from that because consumers, you might think of them, for example, with a phone, like, they interact this way. But by really understanding them, you can understand, well, maybe why do they interact that way? Maybe they should interact with it this way, or maybe they want this that they just haven't articulated yet. Mm-hmm. And so it really does start with understanding the consumer, and then you can make connections of potentially new experiences that they would want that maybe they articulate as unmet needs, but maybe they don't articulate, and that you discover along the way. The things when I was at P&G that I would always love doing are in homes, because you go in somebody's home, and I would do them all around the world, and you just observe people. You see the types of paintings on their wall, or the pictures of their kids, and things that are unsaid, that they're talking about their lives. And it allows you to, as long as you open up your eyes and you're observant, to really probe and ask questions, and then open up where you might make those connections where you weren't before.
Right.
And you just say, oh, well, explain that a little bit more. Help me understand that a little bit more. And that really opens up true innovation, because out of that, you're able to have a couple of ahas around, well, what if we approached it this way, or what if we offered that solution? So.
Right. And I think the in-homes is a great example, because just in the description that you gave of how you view in-home visits, I've done a few myself, and with marketing folks, and the challenge for us being in research and development, products research, was you'd either get a marketer like you who's there to listen and learn and understand, or sometimes you'd get that small minority at Procter, and probably a different ratio at other places, that marketer who was looking to confirm what they already thought or felt or believed. And just in the way you described it, you're there to make the connections. You're there to listen, to understand, to kind of educate yourself, and then come back with something you've learned from them. But that's not always the case in your line of work.
No, you're right. So with my company today, Foresight, we talk about our purpose being discovering truth. And it gets to that point of people who go in with, oh, I'm here to confirm my belief and find the nugget, and you will. You'll find something that somebody says and twist it around. So, well, that just confirms what I want to know.
Yep.
Which is not really serving anyone. It's not serving the business need. And so for us, we've purposely defined our purpose to be about discovering truth, because what we do is we mine online data for insights. Because you think about anything that anybody writes online, whether it's a review of a product, comment on Reddit or Twitter or anywhere, it's unfiltered data, unlike, for example, like a focus group or something where somebody, is looking next to the person next to them and maybe position it because they don't want to be perceived a certain way.
Right.
In the online forum, they are just telling you straight up what they think.
Right.
And there's truth to be discovered in that. And so if you approach it from a mindset of, I want to discover that truth, and out of that truth can be nuggets of connection, like we're talking about, where you say, oh, well, there is an unmet need here, where they're articulating where they want something where they don't have it. And born out of that is true innovation. If you approach it from I'm just here to confirm, that won't be true innovation, meaningful innovation.
Right. The connections remain internal if you do that, right? Because you don't learn anything. You just strengthen the existing sort of neural network that you already had. And you don't create those new connections, those new pathways, if you don't leave yourself open to influence.
Exactly.
I can imagine having an external resource like Foresight can help sort of reinforce the need to break that sort of confirmatory, you're discovering truth, you're not confirming your truth. You're discovering the consumer's truth.
Exactly. And and that's why we take it further. We describe, being a marketer by training. From P&G, we have our own brand character, and we describe it as objective, grounded, and trailblazing. Objective being exactly that, which is we're here to discover that truth and share it. And that truth will lead to innovation, however one defines it.
Right.
And then grounded is, hey, you're grounded in reality. Like, you're not going to spin it, like you said, with preconceived notions. This is what it is. And then trailblazing is just about, having a new approach that is always looking at new ways of doing it, and always looking at new methodologies to uncover that truth and therefore lead you to innovation.
Wow. That's a personality I want to be friends with. That's a brand I want to be associated with. I want to be known, this guy uses foresight. Oh, well, this is what that must mean about him. So that's really, really, really well thought out, and not only reinforces what value you offer to your clients, but I think it does give them a bit of room to kind of aspire to be known for that and position yourself as, hey, if you want to be known as X, Y, and Z, we're the people to help you do that.
Mm-hmm.
In your unique skill set, I'm sure allows you to not only deliver that benefit, but also help them think about how to talk about that benefit. The benefit you provide also becomes a reason to believe almost
Mm-hmm.
for the brand itself. We understand our consumers because we do it this way. We don't do it that way.
Exactly. No, and it's interesting when we start engagements with clients, we almost don't want to get to your point about preconceived notions before you go into research and like that you're trying to confirm something.
Mm.
We almost don't want to know those.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like we will extract all this data, thousands of, sometimes millions or billions of data points,
Right.
and run them through an algorithm. And out of that will be insights that our brand strategists kind of make those connections and see, because the machines don't do it for you,
Right.
as much as all of us would think that. But and then it's not about like, oh, here it is to confirm your, there are a lot of times in the end that we say, oh, well, we're interested. What have you found?
Mm-hmm.
And then to see it, it's interesting to see if it matches, because this is what this is what consumers are saying. Like it or not, this is the reality. And
Correct.
I think any good business person or anyone in any role, whether they're in government or business, is successful if they're dealing with reality. They
Yes.
understand reality and then can, rather than hoping for something different.
Right. Right. A nugget from that description of how you engage with clients, I can imagine there are times when clients just want you, or prospects, I should say, just want you to confirm what they already know. Like you said, you almost don't want to know. I can imagine outreach from folks who just want you to do X, put it through the meat grinder and tell me why. This is what
Mm-hmm.
this is what we want. How do you deal with that?
Yeah, so of course, we're just like anybody who has clients,
Yeah.
or customers or stakeholders. Not
Yeah.
just a stakeholder or customer. Customer's always right, but
Right.
we take those in and say, okay, well, that's great. These are your hypotheses or beliefs. Let's match them with what we find on the other end.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we kind of put it in the parking lot. And then, we just want to make sure in our analysis and, in the machine learning part of it, but then also interpreting those insights that come out of that and telling a story
Sure.
too out of that via brand strategy. It's like, okay, what's the story? What is this data telling you that we're not being led by their hypothesis?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so in the end, that we will look back at those and say, okay, did it confirm or deny what you thought? But we're not leading with that. We want to, with a blank slate, understand the truth. And then ultimately we can come back and say, okay, well, that confirms or did not confirm what you thought.
Right. So you just set it aside from a problem solving standpoint.
Correct.
And try to maintain the purity of the analysis and then come back.
Exactly.
That's good. That's a good approach.
Right.
It's a tough thing for entrepreneurs who don't want to say no and don't want to, you know what I mean? It's I was just curious how you handled it. I knew you had a great way to deal with it. So
you gotta navigate it.
Yep.
Threading needle.
Yeah, exactly. So Mark, that's what innovation is. Tell me in your mind, what isn't innovation?
What innovation is not is incremental change.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also not repackaging something just in a different format.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times, and this happens a lot in consumer packaged goods, where companies, you see it on TV, the biggest innovation yet. And it's basically like a small formula change or packaging change. And unfortunately for consumers, like they've become, just a little jaded by that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not true innovation. So obviously they're calling it new and innovative. And of course, they want to hype it up for their stakeholders,
Right.
their stakeholders being investors or consumers or retailers, whoever they're selling it to. But I think that's a short-term way of viewing it, as opposed to true innovation. I think it unfortunately makes it less meaningful. So I think those kind of incremental changes, sure, they're new,
Right.
but they're not as disruptive as what I think true innovation is. Now, the dictionary definition, of course, of innovation does include incremental change and everything, but in my mind, that's not like the true definition of innovation.
Right. Right. I tend to agree, and I think the implications of that are real in terms of both the sort of fatigue of the consumer, where, if everything's new and innovative and breakthrough, then nothing is new and innovative and breakthrough. But then also internally in a large company like a P&G or a place like that, there's also the risk of that same type of fatigue, where it becomes the person who can sell something as being innovative the best that gets the positions and the conversations and the attention and the funding, versus the person who has the breakthrough, innovative, game-changing sort of solution. And I think that's where companies can tend to get a bit twisted up in terms of, oh, we can tell a good story around this, versus this is going to create a new category, or this is going to step change the performance of this product relative to its competition. So you get these 18-month stories instead of a 5-year competitive advantage.
Exactly. No, and it is those things. It's however you set your benchmark. And I get it. Companies, especially publicly owned companies, have very short-term horizons because investors require it.
Right.
And so how are you innovating and what are you doing? But I think if you're able to look longer term in terms of your strategy, then you're truly defining breakthrough innovation as you described, which is creating a new category, a completely new way for consumers to interact within that category. So those are, it doesn't cheapen the word.
Right, right. So you've been in this space for decades and done a lot of amazing things at Fortune 500 companies, entrepreneurs, startup, multiple startups. You've started a nonprofit. I would imagine innovation kind of runs through that. How would you say innovation has shaped your career?
I do think your point is right on. It's I've always gravitated to more innovative roles. There was a Stanford University study that the most innovative people have different types of friends. As a result, they make different connections, because you might have a friend who's a poet, and then one who's an engineer, and somebody who works as a barista or whatever. But you're seeing different experiences, and that makes you innovative. So I've always gravitated towards roles that were more innovative when I was at P&G. So when we worked together, for example, on Pampers, and Pampers, and then I was the brand manager in Can Do, which many people probably don't remember that little brand, but I love that little frog.
It was,
and it was great. I mean, it was a
amazing.
Small brand by P&G standards. You had $10 billion Pampers, and you had $150 million Can Do, which was small by P&G standards, but still a nice little business.
$150 million, yeah.
Exactly. We did some just amazing things on that brand. We ended up making a cartoon, because it was all about enabling kids to do the toilet task themselves, wipe their bum, wash their hands, wash their hair or whatever. Exactly. Yeah. And so as we started thinking about the earlier conversation, how can you connect with those kids? Well, what do kids do? They watch cartoons. They love cartoons. And we had this little frog character, this green frog character. And his role was kind of this Calvin and Hobbes thing, where he was this invisible helper. So he wasn't the lead for the kid. And so but kids interact with cartoons. And we discovered one time, it was like in London or whatever, this kid was like sleeping with his Can Do bottle because he loved this frog.
Wow.
Said, we really have this connection with this frog character. And so we went out to California, and we found this company that created a cartoon for us and ended up selling it to the WB. It was on the WB network for 3 or 4 years, called Will and Do It, on Saturday mornings on the WB.
Wow.
And I love that. And that just, creating something new where you have a blank sheet of paper and you have a meaningful result and connection. So that's always just got my juices going.
Yeah.
And whether it's at P&G or, to your point, like a startup or a nonprofit, and especially in the nonprofit world, because I do believe, you're not just selling something, you're actually impacting people's lives in a meaningful way, and seeing the result of that is always meaningful. So when I was at P&G, just one example on that, which kind of brings this innovation thing to life. As you mentioned, I started this nonprofit, Go Vibrant.
Mm-hmm.
The mission statement is making an active, energetic lifestyle irresistible. It's this idea, rather than telling people you need to exercise and it's kind of something you have to do, you want to make it something you want to do. And the insight is that activity, when it feels like play, is irresistible.
Wow, that's great.
So you think about when you were a kid, you played and you jumped and you climbed trees and you rode a bike because it felt like play.
Yeah.
And so how can we create experiences like that where people don't even realize that they're getting exercise, quote unquote, but they are. And so one specific experience, when I was traveling, my wife and I, we came across this park that was this interactive park. It was in Vienna, where movement caused things to happen. So you moved and the water moved and you made a noise and something else moved.
Wow.
And I came back to Cincinnati and had a meeting at P&G with this guy, Sean Parker, in the lobby. And I showed, it was kind of the end of the meeting after I was talking about all these walking routes we were doing and other things.
Yeah.
And I showed him this video and I rhetorically said, how can we bring this to Cincinnati? And he's like, how quickly can you make it happen? What are you talking about? And he's like, well, we're thinking of giving a gift to the city, maybe $500,000, but we would rather create an experience. So within a week, I had pulled together people to brainstorm. There were creative types and people from the parks and urban architects and all these people, like, again, different types of people to innovate.
Yeah.
And we created what today, for your listeners who are not familiar with Cincinnati, our riverfront used to be just a dilapidated parking lot and 2 stadiums.
Mm-hmm.
And it is transformed today to what's called Snow Riverfront Park. And a portion of that, 4.5 acres, is what is called this Go Vibrantscape. And what it is like, think about the movie Big, where they have the foot piano. Remember?
Yeah.
So there's an outdoor foot piano, and there's this big flying pig, and the parents have to pull on it in order to get the kids active. So the parents are getting exercise with their kids rather than sitting there with their phones on. And you have these poles that you climb the bell and you hit the bell, and so you're competing, quote unquote, with your kid, chasing them up. And so the objective is really to create this experience that's so irresistible that people and parents are not sitting there with their phones watching their kids play, but they're actually doing it with them.
That's fantastic.
And so that's an example, I think, of a different kind of innovation, right? Where you're creating something completely new. Nobody said, oh, we need this kind of park experience.
Right.
No.
Right.
But once they have it, it's kind of like the iPhone today, right? Nobody said, oh, I need an iPhone 20 years ago.
Right.
But once you have it, how could you not live without a smartphone?
Right.
And so that's just an example of, I think, seeing something and trying to make different connections and then bringing it to life.
Yeah, connections on so many different levels. I love that example. Connections in terms of the various types of creatives you pulled together to make it happen. And then the outcome of those connections created connections within family, probably within strangers, that when you're active and you're interacting with something like that, it generates connections of its own. That's great. Next time I'm in town, I'm definitely going to have to go check that out. That's exciting.
No, you're right. I mean, every time I cross, because if you go from Kentucky into Cincinnati, you see the park there. Mm-hmm. And I see, you're right. I mean, you see it brings people together, east, west side, which is very Cincinnati thing. People are different parts of town, black, white, young, old, rich, poor. Yep. Everybody comes together. And that's the part that I find meaningful when you innovate in something and you see that creation that you've created, and you've enabled people to have a little bit more joyful experience.
Yeah. Speaking of, creating things for people and enabling them to live better lives, you've taken on a new challenge for yourself here recently, haven't you?
Yes, I have. What do you mean, Jared? Yeah, no, I have. I never thought I was going to do anything in public service, but I have recently announced I'm running for city council here in Cincinnati.
All right, that's exciting. I'm so excited about that.
I am excited.
We've been talking about innovation and talking about all the different ways you have you know, experienced it and brought it to life. And I can't wait to see how you do that throughout both the campaign and your successful campaign what you could do in the public sector.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we don't really think of government as being innovative,
Right.
but I do think cities in particular have the ability to be incubators of innovation because the problems that cities face, are not yes, Cincinnati has unique challenges as all cities do, but issues around affordable housing, issues around poverty, issues around transportation,
Hmm.
these are consistent across the country, whatever community you're in, large,
Right.
small, and the opportunity to approach it differently, because I think we collectively, big picture as a country, we need different solutions. The toolbox that we have for solving our quote unquote societal problems is kind of rusty. And
Hmm.
we really need to find different approaches and new innovative approaches. So that's the part that excites me, to tackle issues, especially around poverty. I mean, I grew up poor, working poor, worked my way through college.
Hmm.
My mom was on food stamps when I was a kid, and
Hmm.
and I see myself and a lot of kids in Cincinnati. We have 40% of kids living below the poverty line, which is twice the national average.
Did you say 40%?
40.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. And so I look at that, and we need innovative solutions to these problems that we have, and dedicated attention to helping to solve them.
Yeah, Mark, I'm so excited that you're bringing your skills and your passion to this space. And Cincinnati needs it, Ohio needs it, America needs it. There's just not enough people with your level of commitment and experience and passion involved in solving these problems that affect people's day-to-day lives.
I appreciate the kind words, but yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it is people's lives, and
Yeah.
how can you positively impact people's lives? So because my campaign is all about equitable opportunity.
Hmm.
I was fortunate to be given that as a young kid, and I think everybody should have that opportunity. And that's what I think we should be about, is making sure that we knock down the barriers to anyone not having that opportunity to live to their fullest potential.
That is that's great, man. I just I'm again, blown away by the clarity, you know, each thing we've talked about across the conversation, everything you've created, you've been able to talk about in a sentence. Like, what does this thing do? What was the goal here? What were we trying to accomplish here? What was the benefit here? And you're bringing that same level of clarity to your view of these public sector issues, and I think that's going to be very beneficial for Cincinnati. And I wish you all the best in your campaign.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
I know if I didn't bring it up, you wouldn't have. But I'm so excited for you, and
Thank you. Thank you.
really looking forward to watching from afar.
I appreciate it.
So, you know, any advice or thoughts that you'd like to offer innovators out there?
Yeah, they're kind of three buckets. The first gets back to what I talked about with that Stanford University study, which empirically says that people with different types of friends are better innovators.
Hmm.
And so it's very easy in our everyday lives to, we all live in a bubble, whatever bubble that is. And I think social media makes that worse, right?
Hmm.
Where you don't break out of that bubble. You go to a certain school and you study engineering or you study whatever, but really making an effort to have different kinds of friends. And different kinds is not, I mean, diversity in the true sense of the word, of ethnicity, obviously, religion, but even beyond that, of profession, as I
Hmm.
mentioned, kind of poets and engineers and and people who just have very different experiences and view on life. Not that you do that to be innovative, because I think that's the wrong intent. You shouldn't, but you should do it because it'll make your life richer.
Right.
An output of that, I think, is that you will be also more innovative. So that's the first. And the second is just getting as many different types of experiences as possible. I've always been a big believer of, and it's a little cliche, to take your vacation. But truly, because I think you come back and you've seen different things and made different connections and thought about, the way that you approach whatever your work you're doing.
Right.
And I think it makes you fresher. And again, it makes you look at different, connections. So in my case, government, private sector, nonprofit, and then keeping in that way also, even if it's like volunteering on the side for a nonprofit, if your day job is for profit, or, doing something else, volunteer on the side to just see things a little bit differently. And then the last one is just, reading, absorbing new ideas, pushing yourself to read something completely different, or maybe watch a documentary or show that's totally different, or whatever the case may be. But all of that forces you to make different connections, which comes back to the first point about what fosters true innovation.
Thank you for that. I love all 3 points, and they kind of reinforce the conversation nicely, because the way you think about innovation is also how you operate, which I think makes it easy for people to understand, because just the examples we talked about reinforce your advice, which is not always the case. Some people are do as I say, not as I do kind of people.
My biggest times for innovation is when I run.
Yeah.
Everybody has their own, but I don't listen to music. I just let my mind go, and then I'm solving problems. And so everybody needs whatever that is. It might be quiet time in the woods, or quiet time at home, or whatever. But I arm wrestle piano tunes for that. That's what I do. Exactly.
Try to will them into submission. Mark, I appreciate the time, my friend, and I know you're busy, and we appreciate you making the time to chat, and it's just great to see you.
No, it's quite the honor. Thank you for inviting me, and I've really enjoyed the conversation. So thanks so much, Jared.
All right, take care. We'd love to hear your thoughts about this week's show. You can drop us a line on Twitter at Outlast LLC, OUTLAST LLC, or follow us on LinkedIn, where we're Outlast Consulting. Until next time, keep innovating, whatever that means.